Welcome back to Danger's Edge. This is Ryan here, and today we are doing a video of the top 10 most dangerous sports that people do out there. Now there's a lot of different sports that people do that are really crazy, so I've kind of narrowed each section. Each video or photo I'm going to show you is going to be a culmination of every peripheral sport around that kind of activity. So getting started with number 10, we have fighting. I have a picture of the UFC here, and essentially this encompasses everything where people are fighting each other one-on-one. This is one of those sports where you're guaranteed to get hurt, like unless you're godly. Whether it's martial arts, UFC, I don't really know all of the types, but essentially one-on-one combat to the point of knocking someone unconscious or breaking their bones.
Wow.
Now this is definitely a dangerous sport. All of these are. But the reason why it's really low on this tier list is because I think that the death ratio is really low. Now it's a high injury ratio. You're going to see this throughout the tier list here, the listing of top 10, that there's kind of the two spectrums of how much you get hurt versus the risk of death. And so, all these fighting one-on-one or, I guess multiple on multiple kind of fighting scenarios that people do for fun, I guess, or for money, you're gonna see that a lot of them get hurt a lot, but the death ratio is probably a lot lower than these other ones on the list, so this is gonna get the bottom in regards to that. Still, making this list is a big deal. These are the sports and the things that people willingly do for thrills, and this is one where people just constantly beat each other to a pulp. Definitely not one that I would ever do. I don't really see the fun in it at all. I think that you can learn all of the work, put in all the work and learn all of the craft without necessarily putting it into practice and harming someone or harming yourself. But if it's all consensual, go ahead, just definitely not for me. So moving on to number 9, we have cliff jumping. Now cliff jumping is extremely dangerous because there is not a lot of regulation for it when you go outside of the regulated stuff. Anyone can go do it, there's no there's no license or anything, like, I guess you can say the same about fighting, but I feel like you just don't see people beating each other up as much for fun when they're not getting paid for it. Kind of a weird claim, I'd say. Probably not true. Cliff diving is just more dangerous because you have a higher risk of death for sure. There's a lot that people do that is kind of just like, this looks like a good place. If they don't check the water, that's like, you can dive as good as you want, but if you hit a rock, you're screwed. A lot of people are drowning because of this.
Come on, man.
Doing flips and whatnot, like, it's really difficult. You mess up one thing, you flinch. This is why I'm really bad at cliff diving, is because I get really in my head about it. You're way up there and I'm like, well, if I hesitate, which I constantly do, it's gonna end up in a belly flop or a back flop. So I never really trust myself to do any kind of flip at a high distance. There's just like a lot that could go wrong with cliff diving, cliff jumping in general. You start adding in flips and rotations, it's amazing what people have the courage to do. But the reason this is kind of low on the list is because unless you're going from the really, really big heights, all you're gonna get is a slap in the face. It's probably the worst, no matter how you're spinning. So it's kind of like not that difficult till it hits a point where it's like deathly risky. And I think people who are really good can go from many heights, but it only takes one, as you're gonna see moving on from this list, it only takes one to really knock you out. And if you're diving alone, you're probably not gonna have any type of security to keep you safe if you hit and you get rattled and then you're floating to the bottom, kind of like trying to come to. Very scary. Not really for me, but I do want to push myself more in the sense of cliff diving and really get used to that controlling of fear and composure in the air while increasing in speed. So pretty low on the list, but still one of my favorite ones to participate in personally. Probably one of the only ones I participate, but we'll move on now. Speed. So next one is going to be skateboarding, and this is going to encompass anything in this world. So I'm talking about scootering, I'm talking about BMX, I'm talking about parkour, rollerblading. I've seen some crazy unicycling out there. Anything where you're taking a wheeled object or your body and sending it down, flights of stairs, crazy rails, wall rides. All of this is relatively not too dangerous in the sense of death, because most people get capped out by their fear, and it's really like accidents on big rails or like hitting a set and I don't know, like your bike snapping and you smacking your dome. Like, these are the things that will really get you. But they aren't necessarily deathly in that sense as much as they are also like the UFC in the sense of you're just gonna get beat up. Even landing your shit, like you're gonna take impact. Your knees are gonna get shot, your wrists, you're gonna like have back problems. Although honestly, I have an amazing back. Never a problem with my back.
Yeah, baby,
But these are definitely, this is a world that I know the most of, coming from scootering, skateboarding a lot as a kid, longboarding as well, and it's brutal. It's very brutal, and the best of the best, they get wrecked. They get wrecked really hard because the higher you go, the higher the stakes are, and the crazier the tricks that people are doing. It's a very intense and dangerous sport category. You know, I would say that I would like to see more out of like the scene in regards to how big people go, but it's insane. Like people go so big, constantly pushing the envelope, and it's usually the youth. There's a big drop off once you hit like your mid-20s to 30s of what people will expect of you to do and what you'll be doing when it comes to big sets. But big rails across the board, people seem to constantly be doing that at any age, because you only really get hurt if you don't land it. Or big sets, even if you land it or you kick out once, you're messed up for life. So yeah, skateboarding and all these peripheral sports here are going to be number 8 on the list because of how gnarly they are, but honestly not the biggest killers, not the biggest risk in the sense of that. Because another thing to mention is that you can kind of protect yourself, and a lot of these that you'll see coming up is if you mess up, you can't protect yourself. You can't roll out of it or use dexterity to save yourself from a bigger injury. A lot of these moving forward you're in it, you know, you're committed to these slams, and it's risky. So moving on to number 7, we have snow sports. Specifically, snowboarding comes to mind. I think snowboarders are one of the most insane extreme sports people out there. They hit the craziest big obstacles. They're doing it while moving on water, a slippery surface, and they're strapped in, which is the craziest part to me. The big no thank you for me is being strapped in while doing anything like this. And you can see that they're doing like quadruple backflips, they're hitting crazy kinked rails, they're jumping I've seen someone jump like a 42 stair on the snowboard, you know, just like jumping to that many stairs. It's ridiculous. The most stairs I've ever seen anything jump. And you know, these people get broke off, and a lot of it's because they can't get out of it. They can't throw their board and roll or anything. They're committed to being on the snowboard and they're stuck in it. Same thing with skis. They get these crazy injuries because they can't really get out once they commit to trying an activity. Even like the wilderness stuff where they build big ramps on hillsides and just launch crazy. Like I can't even fathom the commitment or like just the understanding. Although what they do have going for them in the sense of making it easier is they build their spots 100% of the time. They build these ramps on and off of things. They have a lot of bungee cords that they do to get the right speed. But a lot of this is just necessary for the sport. So, you know, I think this is one where there is probably a higher death rate than any of the ones above: snowboarding, cliff jumping, fighting, or skateboarding I meant, because of that lack of control in the sense of evasion. You're really signed up for whatever happens when you let go of that bungee cord and you're approaching the stair set. I don't know how you warm up for such things. You just kind of go for it. So that's, you know, that's why this one is where it is. And the fact that this is where it is on the list shows how crazy the other ones can be, you know. So this one definitely takes the spot for number, what is this, 7 on the list for craziest. Moving forward, we have big bikes, moto. So anything on the bike, essentially. I'm gonna say mountain biking, anything on dirt, because yeah, it's just self-explanatory. These people are going off ramps on dirt with motors, going amazing distances, and doing flips, doing whips, doing spins, like doing like all these crazy grab variations. It's just an insane option of sport here. Granted, I think this is one of the funnest as a mountain biker. It's really fun to go fast on a bike and have your suspension take care of you, making corners, hitting jumps. It's a very, very fun sport. A lot. But it's very risky. I've taken some slams that I'm like shocked from it. You know, I call it for like a week or two. Like, I'm good. I need time to mentally recover from what happened there. So it can get pretty crazy pretty fast, and there's a huge amount of injuries with these huge jumps in motorbikes, especially where the bikes land on them or they just don't spin all the way, and like you don't realize how much impact you're about to feel if you're off the bike, because when you land on the bike, it eats all that impact, but without it, like, you get shocked, you get rocked really quick. So in this, you know, for these types of sports, I definitely armor up as much as I can. I'm that guy looking like a Ninja Turtle, because I know how it feels to not land on the bike, and it's painful. And the way that people are doing it nowadays, like, I could see death being very frequent for mountain biking, especially for downhill, big jumps, any kind of motocross. It's just a very high risk scenario. But it's one of those things where, as you'll see moving on, the higher that this spectrum of this goes, the lower end, like we've had UFC, cliff jumping, all that, these are ones where you're probably guaranteed to get hurt. You're gonna slap your back on some cliff jumps, you're gonna, you know, not land on your snowboard or your skateboard, like, and you're gonna get hurt minorly. But moving forward, you're gonna see that it's like, you can go years without really falling off a motorbike. But when you do fall, it could kill you. So it's gonna be a high risk in the sense of death moving forward, and kind of shying away from these like minor injury kind of scenarios. So moving on to number 5, halfway through, we have waterfall kayaking. And yes, this is real. This is one of the most insane decisions that people do that I could think of, where you are in a kayak, so you can't use your legs, and you have a paddle on, you know, double-sided, and you got your raft, and you just paddle down a river, purposefully falling down waterfalls. And I gotta say, out of all the sports on this list, I would say this one is one of the ones where I'm like, it's not as cool, and I don't really get it, you know? Like, I see people do these, and they go down it, and then they go under, and they flow back up, and they're still on it. But I'm like, I as a viewer, I can't understand where the technique is. I can't understand what looks clean, you know, what's well done, because most of the time it just looks like hanging on, and, you know, all you really have is motion like this and your arms, you know, like this. So I think it's more about knowing the course and committing. But I bet people get rocked in this, you know, because if you go down and you flip and you hit your head, like, you're dead. You're upside down floating in a canoe. How fast can people get to you at the end of a waterfall to flip you over? You know, it's just a crazy one to me. And I can't imagine a sport like a kayak company giving kids these and being like, jump off a waterfall, we encourage it, we will support you. It's a bizarre sport, and, you know, I'm probably gonna get some hate for that, but I enjoy seeing it. I just don't understand it. I don't think that I would never do it, you know. I wouldn't. If any of my friends were like, I'm getting into this, I would try and talk them down probably, because it's just too bizarre for me. I don't see the appeal. Like, you know, in the world of scootering and mountain biking and stuff, there's a lot of technique that's visible, and there's a lot of euphoric feelings of like jumping a big set and landing, hitting a rail, hitting some ramps, or like a big, you know, gap of sorts. Like, there's like euphoric feelings of like accomplishing these, where you can do, you know, like, you could say the same thing about the kayak, but I feel like it just doesn't translate the same. It feels random most of the time. It feels like you're just kind of strapping in for a ride like at Disney, and you're not as much being tactical. You know, maybe I've hated on this enough, so we'll move on, but it's number 5, so I'll give you that, guys. It's crazy. You got that from me. So moving on, number 4, we have free soloing, and you're probably thinking this should be number 1. This is the craziest sport that you could possibly do. And, you know, I thought about putting it higher, but there are some things about it that just wouldn't let me do that. Now, obviously this is a freaking crazy sport. Like, no security, you know, no harnesses, no parachute or anything, no helmet, just climbing up mountains with chalk. And no one does it better than Alex Honnold, as we all know. He is insane at this. Like, personally, I could never do this sport because I have a fear of heights, and my hands get sweaty when I'm nervous. That's the first thing that goes. They've been sweaty this whole entire video, by the way. So looking at the sport, you know, it's really high up here because obviously a lot of people die doing this, and it's one of those sports where you don't get any safety, right? Like UFC, you can get beat up like crazy, but at the end of the day, you can go home and ice yourself and chill. But if you fall free soloing, you're dead. You're dead. If you go halfway and you regret it, a lot of times you can't just climb back down the way you came. It's a very intense and crazy sport, and I imagine I can feel that euphoric feeling just by watching it of like, wow, that must feel amazing to have this kind of accomplishment of self-determination and execution of like what you believe you can do. It's phenomenal, and I wish that I had that kind of energy and like just a support system of people around me to like get into it, you know, safely. But I would never go free solo. Even if I did the track 1,000 times, like I don't think I wouldn't see the reason to, you know, I wouldn't believe enough in the cause to I feel like it's very similar to what you're already doing. It's just the mentality thing of like being accountable on yourself. But yeah, it's a crazy sport. Definitely deserves to be number 4 on the list, if not higher, because of how deadly it is. But the reason it isn't higher is because it's very calculated. You're in control the whole time. Like a lot of these things, like the motorbike, you know, the kayak stuff, like they are more dangerous in the sense of you lacking control. You're playing the environment more than you're playing yourself. Yeah, rock climbing is crazy.
Wow, it's very nice.
The accountability that you need to have of yourself to successfully do this constantly on new stuff. I think one of the craziest things about it too is when people are doing on-site, which is where they go to a rock structure that they haven't climbed ever, and they climb it free solo first try. They just wing it, and that's like a really insane way of doing it. But even with that, I'd say it kind of caps out on how crazy of a sport it is, because you're always in control. You can always kind of go back down if you're methodical about it. I think the people who last the longest in the sport are the ones that are very smart and not emotionally like driven by excitement as much. Like I think they're more level-headed throughout the whole thing, and they don't get impulsively like, oh, this would be fun, I can do it faster. In the moment, like they decide that they're gonna do it faster when they've already done it before and such. And overall, crazy sport. So moving into number 3, we have cave scuba diving. Now, I don't even know if I could technically call this a sport. I think it's more of like an operation, or, you know, an execution of a plan is really what's going on here, what people probably do for fun, along with the exploring. But this is also like the kayaking one where I'm like, I don't get it. I would never do this. It's so much equipment, it's expensive. You're going somewhere where people have a high risk of dying because of so many factors. I went through a rabbit hole of like all the YouTube water scuba diving and cave horror stories, and there's a lot of them for a reason. There's so many things that can go wrong with your air, you know, with the passages you take, your mapping. A lot of times people will kick up soot and you get blinded in the tornado, and it takes a long time for all of that to settle. You can get disconnected from your friends, you could forget which way to exit, lights can go out. It's a very dangerous sport, and I get cave exploring, I really do. And I know that you have to earn it in certain areas where you have to go in these conditions to get to like really cool spots. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know, it's just, I don't need to see those places for how risky this is, and I don't need to frequently do it. I don't need to constantly go underwater and, you know, be in a situation where like you're underwater and you can't even answer a phone call, you know, like you are completely restricted in a foreign area with no reception, like your options of safety are so limited. So this is why this one is so high up, is because of how risky it is. And this is all about the most dangerous sports. So how risky this one is. Like you could go down there, no one would know where you are. And a lot of times in these horror stories that I've seen, they don't know that you're down there and stuck until it's already been like hours past when you're supposed to come home. So a really dangerous one that I wouldn't ever do. I have no interest in being underwater with all this apparatus, you know, super crazy, super gnarly, but not even the top of the list in my opinion of the most dangerous. So we're gonna keep moving on to number 2, the big surf. Yes, big surf is definitely one of the most dangerous sports out there, and I think one of the most beautiful in my opinion, because unlike other sports where you are using, I don't know, your own energy to perform tasks, surfing is really cool because you're using the ocean. It's like, it's creating energy that you are you're working in synergy with to perform. And I think that's a really rare thing and really cool. But big surf is definitely extremely gnarly. I would never do it, although I would love to be able to, you know. I mean, there's a huge rate of death for big surf of you messing up and going under so long in the tide or the wave, you know, underwater, that you drown. Like you can't even surface because of how much water there is. The other thing is the impact of the wave can actually just crush you and kill you. So it's one of those ones, just like free soloing, where it's like really you have to be accountable for yourself in the scenario, and you have to know what you can bite off, and you have to be able to perform under pressure. And, you know, it's just you. Like, you can't, there's no safety nets. You don't have like a guy on a helicopter holding you by a string, so if you're like, I'm done, he pulls you off and they chopper away. No, you have to actually do the whole entire wave. You know, there's no excuses, there's no plan B. That's why it's extremely crazy. And on top of that, surfing at such a high speed too is a very, very sensitive task. I mean, there's so many things that could happen, and the ocean, you know, 99% of it, you're just gonna be riding on water, but you could hit some seaweed. I've seen people get hit off their boards by dolphins, of all things. So there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of random variables that could happen while you're trying to hit this giant wave of high-speed water moving, curling over you, and you're just on your board committed, you know, and it's insane. The reason it's way bigger than free soloing, in my opinion, for how crazy and dangerous it is because there is no escape. You can't even just hang on. Like in free soloing, if you're nervous, you can just hold yourself in place and find yourself. You can zen out, you can try to go back down the way you came, you know. There's a lot, even with that in free soloing, you can carry all the gear. You can have somebody near you free soloing and you guys can say, I'm done free soloing, I'm gonna clip up and figure it out from there safely. No, you can't just figure out a way out of big surf. You have to do it. It's insane. It's one of the most in tune with nature feats that you could do, of like, this is one of the most powerful things that nature can generate, is a wave of this magnitude. And you're choosing to not only ride it, but like, it's just crazy. It's an insane sport, and I have so much respect. And I understand that chase, because I think it's like, you know, another thing I should say about all of these sports is that when you're doing it correctly, it feels effortless. You're in tune, you're going with the flow of things. And that's what's really addicting about it, is because then you're like, I could do that. And just stay calm and do it exactly like last time, very relaxed. You know, the pros of all these places, they're very relaxed, all these sports. So big surf is definitely one of those ones where people kind of, you know, often bite off more than they can chew. And survivor stories are very impressive. And I would never do it. I would love to try it, but I can't even surf at that quality. I don't think I ever will. So moving on to number one, the craziest, most dangerous sport ever. It's gonna be squirrel suits, or anything flying, but specifically squirrel suits. This is insane. This photo here is one of the most insane things I've ever seen, where this guy squirrel suits off a cliff of a mountain and goes through a little hole. It's actually giant, but him, a small target for how fast he's going, just flying through. And this is also one of those sports that I would love to be able to do. I'm just nowhere near it right now. I've never even skydived. I've never been in a squirrel suit. Like, I have no experience, but man, it seems like one of the best feelings on earth to be just literally flying, just yourself. And you know, just like I said about the other one, that's what makes it gnarly, is like, you might not get injured much, but you'll die when you mess up. And that's what's craziest about this one. You're going so fast, even if you have a parachute, like how much can a parachute help you in these scenarios? Because you're usually low to the ground. That's what's crazy. You're flying low, but not actually dropping as much as gliding, you know? Falling in style, as Buzz would say from Toy Story. And you know, it's obvious that why this is first, right? Like, the huge death rate. It's just like the big surf and all of those categories, where you have to really be committed in what you're doing. There's no plan B. You have to go relaxed, you know. But I think this one's even crazier than big surf, because big surf, like, there is a lot of ways that you could escape with your life, but this one, there's only one way you escape with your life, and that's doing it right. There's specific paths you have to go not to hit trees. You have to really know your whole line. You have to know the weather. You have to be able to, you know, move efficiently and accurately. It's just an insane choice of hobby. And I can't, even if I could do it, I don't think I would do it more than like once or twice. You know, once to say I did it, twice to do it with style, and then I'm done. It's just too dangerous, you know? I got too much that I enjoy about life to be risking it all every time I go have fun. I'd rather do mountain biking, where the worst I get is a good slam, maybe I break something eventually, and you know, I still got my life. So that's my tier list, my top 10 of the most dangerous sports that are out there that people do for fun. And you know, I'd love to hear if you guys have any other recommendations. I'm sure all you kayak guys are going to be really pissed at me that I kind of dissed your sport, but know that I put you guys high up here. I think you guys are crazy. I just don't, that's the one that I probably would do last if I had to do any of these. I'd rather get my face beat in like a UFC match than try and kayak down a waterfall. All right guys, that's going to be it for our video on the most dangerous sports that you could possibly do on this planet that people choose to do willingly for fun. And you know, I want to appreciate you guys for watching. Look forward to other content, specifically knife throwing videos coming out. We got some big ones coming out, and you can always check out our store. We got some merch here like the Yosemite shirt, the caveman crown hat, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.